Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen. And this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Don Neuen.
I'm Don Neuen. And let me be the first to welcome you to tonight's absolutely riveting episode of Cowboy Logic Radio. Boy, have we got a big show for you. I feel like Judge Janine is in the house, Donna.
She is. She is coming up later on in the show. My old friend from the Fox News Channel, Judge Janine PIRRO, will be talking to her.
Here come the judge. Here come
Yes,
the
she
judge. What
does.
is that from?
Order in the
Flip
court.
Wilson?
Here come the judge. Actually,
I believe it
was
is.
Rowan and Martin's laughing.
I don't. Was it really?
Oh, no, maybe it was Flip Wilson.
I think it might have been Flip
I
Wilson.
think you're right.
Maybe not.
You're dating yourself.
Yeah, I'm dating myself, but hey,
Speaking
somebody's
of
got to
dating-
date me.
Yeah. Speaking of dating oneself, remember that old song, Which Came First, the chicken or the egg?
I remember the saying. I don't remember the song.
First, the chicken or the egg? Well, it was a song, too.
Is that like the My Pillow song?
Yeah, but different. And it's not as lumpy.
Hey, before you get into that, big shout out to one of our absolute loyal listeners, one Roostall,
Yes.
who constantly is hitting me in social media, and she's either aligning herself with what we have to say, or she'll point out some quirky something or other that I had to say. And Roostall, we love you, and we appreciate the fact that you listen to Cowboy Logic Radio loyally. Thank you.
While you're doing that, I want to mention someone as well. Frank Frances, however you want to pronounce his name. He's the paisan. Always emails me with a lot of information, and we do thank him for that. Many times I use it on the show, and I give him credit, but he listens quite religiously as well, and we do thank him too, because it's what we do this for. We are trying to wake up the sleeping giant.
Well, while
And I
we're
would
thanking people, I want to thank somebody else, Donna.
Okay,
I want to
be
thank.
that way.
I want to thank. Let me think. Tony, Mr. Bag of Donuts.
Over at Bowden Pawn.
Well, no, yeah, we got Tony Bag of Donuts over there, but I'm talking about Tony Bag of Donuts from Southern Philly that listens to the show all the time.
Him too, yeah.
And now name one more Guido that you have up in in Jersey.
Well, Judge Janine, although she's married to a Guido. And she's
We'd
in
like
New
to
York.
thank you very much, Judge Janine, for tuning in and listening to the Cowboy Logic Radio show as often as you do. We really appreciate it, appreciate it. Back to you, Donna.
All right, so which came first, the dossier or Carter Page? Which came first, the dossier or Carter Page?
All right, you brought up Carter Page, so I have to speak out on this, Donna.
Yes.
Is it just me, or when you look into the eyes of Carter Page, you go, void.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing in there.
Dope.
Yeah.
A lot different
I
from
mean, he
when
does.
George...
He really looks like a mental midget.
It's funny you mention that, because remember George W. Bush had a meeting with Putin and said, I looked into his eyes and I saw his soul.
Well, that was actually a very profound episode that was recorded from the Bush Library.
Yes. And how about...
it was highly insightful. Matter of fact, I listened to it, I think, 3 or 4 times. Bill Browder, if I'm not mistaken, was on that.
Uh-huh. Well, my other question is, how about Barack Obama saying to Medvedev, Putin's number 2 guy, just let me get reelected. This is back in 2012, and I'll have more leeway.
Yeah, you know what? That thing's been beat in the ground. Here's the deal.
Beat into the ground. It needs to be reset.
Sean Hannity says it every 7 seconds on his show.
Yeah, but nobody else does.
Well,
and
you expect anybody else to say it?
My question is, how can you say that? It's tangible evidence, and then have this stuff. You've got Carter Page, like you say, he's a void. He's just there.
He's a dope.
Yeah, he's really dope.
All right, well,
He had a
listen.
10-hour questioning session, supposedly to clear things up on the FISA warrant. There's no there, and he's never been indicted, by the way. So this actually pretty much says the whole Mueller thing is a joke.
Here's the deal.
What?
Let's really try to unpack this thing in really simplistic terms, because as everyone will admit, this is hugely convoluted. All right? Mm-hmm. Here's the bottom line. In 2016, everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. Mm-hmm. And when she wasn't, the entire left wing, the entire mainstream media, and all of the people in the Obama administration absolutely freaked out.
And the deep state.
Let me finish the thought.
Okay.
Because if Hillary Clinton would have been elected, none of this would have ever been discussed or brought to light.
Absolutely.
Nobody would have known anything about it.
Yep.
But that's not what happened. Trump got elected. And election night, you could see it in the eyes of everybody. They were absolutely crapping a mud turtle, because all of a sudden, they had to figure out a way to get this whole thing covered up. Mm-hmm. And they had to blame it on Trump, and they had to destroy Trump, because it was the only thing that they could do to try to save their backside. And now it's starting to unravel. And all of these people that Trump was talking about yesterday, revoking security clearances, Susan
Comey,
Wright, Clapper,
Hayden,
Comey, what's his name, Brennan,
McCabe,
they're all in on it.
Yeah.
They are all in on this. And the thing is, their plan ended on election night at about 3 o'clock in the morning. It ended. And all of a sudden, they had to go to Plan B. And Plan B was to discredit Donald Trump, try to bury him, try to run him out of office, try to make him to where his supporters wouldn't have anything to do with him, and try to have all of this hoopla cover up everything they needed covered up.
I believe Hillary Clinton actually said, of course, she didn't show up with all of her adoring fans over at the Javits Center for her quote-unquote victory party that never happened.
Do you mean the Coldplay concert?
Yes. She actually said, we are you-know-whatted if he wins. And that word she used was the same word that Whoopi Goldberg used on numerous occasions backstage to our friend Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Yeah, well,
basically, and that's true, because like you say, this never would have come to light if she got elected. The thing is, though, Carter Page was on with Hannity yesterday, and he said, I had 2 interviews before and 2 interviews afterwards. And the whole idea is that there was no intelligence. It was false intelligence that was used, and therefore the whole house of cards should come down.
Well, again, that's what it is. It's a house of cards.
Yep.
You know, and you and I watched for a number of seasons House of Cards.
Yeah.
With Kevin Spacey and the whatever her name is, Robin Penn, Sean Penn's ex. All right? And the thing is, that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of deceit. And I'll tell you something else, Donna, that I've been thinking a lot about. And that is, Donald Trump is Washington, D.C.'s worst damn nightmare. And here's why. Anybody else, let's go all the way back to Carter and Reagan. I mean, we love Ronald Reagan. But the thing is, K Street and the lobbyists had a piece of Ron Reagan. And they had a piece of Carter. And they had a piece of Bush. And they had a piece of Clinton. And Bush 43. And Obama. They don't have a piece of Donald Trump. They can't manipulate him. They can't own him. And he's their worst nightmare because of that.
And the thing is, I love how they twist it, because now the mainstream media, because Trump is threatening to pull all the security clearances, which to me, I don't understand why it hasn't had the security clearance pulled in the first place. But they're calling it diplomatic malpractice now by the President of the United States. Sorry, gang, he's the President of the United States. And you know what? It's Rod Rosenstein who said Comey should be fired. And when it finally got fired, now he's looking into it. I mean, this is just crazy.
Well, the left is spinning this, and they're spinning it like Donald Trump is coming in and he's squashing guys like Brennan's First Amendment right.
Yeah.
Like he's revoking this clearance, this security clearance, because Brennan acted like a complete putz on MSNBC. That doesn't have anything to do with it.
He talks about treason. You can't have treason in this case, Mr. Brennan, Mr. former CIA chief. You got to be at war with somebody. Well, you know, I mean, this is what's unbelievable. This guy is a CIA career analyst for 25 years, then heads the CIA, doesn't even know what treason is. By the way, folks, yes, he did vote for a communist, and he admits it, back in the 70s. How this guy even got cleared.
Yeah, how did he get clearance in the first place if in 1976 he votes for Gus Hall for president? Gus Hall, ladies and gentlemen, was the head of the Communist Party of America.
Yeah.
How does that happen? And let's blame Bush 43 for it as well, because Bush 43 made him deputy director of the CIA, did he not?
Just before 9/11. Director of the newly created Terrorist Threat Integration Center from 2003 to 2004, an office that sifted through and compiled information for President Bush's daily top-secret intelligence briefings and employed the services of analysts from a dozen U.S. agencies and entities. This guy, Brennan, knew what was going on everywhere.
Of course.
Sorry.
But this is the new norm. This is the new norm, Donna. When you and I were growing up, and in past administrations, there's absolutely no way that somebody that in 1976 voted for Gus Hall, the president of the Communist Party of America, for president of the United States, there's absolutely no way that that individual would have been allowed and confirmed as anything high-ranking in any of the agencies. The FBI, the CIA, nothing. The State Department, they'd have never let him in. But that all changed. And it changed under Bush's watch.
Yeah.
But you know what everybody's failing to really discuss in the mainstream media? And I'll tell you, Fox News is failing miserably at this.
What's that?
Nobody is passing the blame where it needs to be. All of this crap with the Russians, all of it, took place under the Obama watch. Yeah. It took place under the Obama State Department. It took place under the Obama FBI. It took place under the Obama CIA. All of it took place under the Obama administration, and nobody, and the thing is, Fox News ought to be beating this drum louder than hell, and they're not doing it. Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, they're all beating drums that have nothing to do with applying the blame where it needs to go. And Fox News, you're failing conservatism by not handling this the right way. Pass the blame where it needs to be. Bring this out and talk about it every damn night. This took place under the Obama administration.
Well, they do play the one thing quite a bit. Well, when Obama gets up there and basically chastises Trump and says, look, there's no Russian interference. This is maybe 2 months before the election, and says maybe you ought to go back to running for president and run your campaign, something to that effect. Because
they're not doing it effectively enough. They're not bringing on lawmakers. They're not bringing on congressmen and senators and addressing this issue over and over and over. All of this crap took place under the Obama watch.
Well, it really gets me is that then 2 weeks before the inauguration, after Trump was elected, then they pulled him aside and said, yeah, there was some Russian collusion. That's what they said. Or, not collusion, Russian meddling in the election.
So they knew about it all. Russia meddles in everything, Donna.
I know, but the point is they knew about it all along. And
of course
Obama
they did.
Again lied to the people just one more time, latest in a long line, by saying that Trump should just go back to running his campaign and there's no Russian meddling. You know what? Every country meddles. We did it. In fact, Barack Obama did it to Egypt and to Israel. And I mean, he tried to overthrow.
He dumped a ton of money into overthrowing Netanyahu.
Exactly. Devin Nunes did say, though, if the shoe was on the other foot, there'd be heads rolling everywhere. There'd be riots in the streets. Nunes has said that. He's trying to push back. Here's the big thing about Brennan, though, that I hate, that never gets picked up. And we do talk about it a lot, actually, on Frank Gaffney's show, and we're going to talk to him later on in the show as well, as he's part of our show just before Jeanine Pirro. Frank Gaffney, the great one from the Center for Security Policy, about how Brennan purged all of the manuals against Islam for everybody to study, and that is really huge. The purge of information about Muslims and Sharia law from law enforcement manuals, so there's no way our law enforcement is kept abreast of what's going on about Islam.
Well, and if they
Radical
are,
Islam.
they can't say anything or do anything about it.
Well, guess who did the same thing over at the FBI? Robert Mueller.
There you go.
Yeah. The shoe fits.
If the shoe fits, wear it.
Hashtag double standard. I'm just like, there's so much. I have all these pieces of paper in front of me with all this stuff because it just drives me nuts. Then Brennan gets the dossier, which was gotten under false pretenses to begin with. And he talks apparently to Harry Reid. Harry Reid then goes and takes it and asks the FBI to look into it. So the thing is, it was made up. This whole circular thing is made up. It's just, if Rush Limbaugh had a good point, though, I should say this week. If Trump is so buddy-buddy with Putin, why in the world would he tweet in caps an answer to Iran's threat? Don't do it, because Russia and Iran are joined at the hip. And Trump said to Iran, I wouldn't try it, buddies, if I were you. I just would not try it, because Iran has threatened the United States, which, gee, I thought Iran was our buddy. We gave him $145 billion.
Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism on the planet Earth.
That would be treason, Mr. Brennan. That would be treason under your watch.
Look, let me bring up one other thing here about Trump. Mm-hmm. You know, you may like him. You may like everything he does. You may like some of the things he does. You may like a few of the things that he does. But here's the one thing you can't say about Donald Trump. You can't say Donald Trump doesn't love America. And I truly believe that despite the fact that there are things that I disagree that he's done and moves that he's made that I don't necessarily agree with, one thing I can always say is that I believe every move he makes, every decision he makes, every policy he implements, he does out of the love for America, the love for the greatness of America, the pride in America, the sovereignty of America. You can't say that about other presidents.
Well, that's why
Trump loves America, and he's doing exactly what he said he would do to his constituents and his supporters and his voter base. He's doing
fighting
exactly, and he's also
for the little guy.
I heard this earlier tonight. Rush Limbaugh was talking about the fact that at this point in his term, what is it, 19 months into it,
he's at 45% approval rate, but 88% of Republicans approve of him. George W. Bush had the exact same approval rating after 9/11 among Republicans, 88%.
That speaks volumes.
This is just killing the left. Trump derangement syndrome is going into full force. You know, let's talk about the left. Instead of coming back to the center, which usually helps them win elections, they're going farther and farther to the left. They're buckling down. Barack Obama now says he supports Chicago's idea of a basic income. And
what is it, $500 a month?
Yeah, it's just like, and people are leaving Illinois. It's the number one state they're leaving in droves. Number two is my former state of New Jersey, and I joined that group a while ago. The thing is, let's look at New York. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders campaigned out west this past weekend, and I think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is trying to think.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if you could talk about how you think you achieved this victory.
Well, I think that, so for me, and I knew that I believe for me, because to me. So for me, so for me is an implicit, I don't think, but think about, I think about right. No, and well, I think that You know, I don't think, I think, you know, it's true.
That is a 1-hour interview with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and all of those ahs, you knows, and I thinks were not repeated in a 1-hour show. We want to thank Jim Dawes of America First Radio for turning us on to that little soundbite. He does a great show.
Man,
on
he's
our
got
networks.
a great show.
He does a phenomenal
and a great
show.
guy.
Seek him out, folks, if you can. He really does
Seek
a phenomenal show.
him out.
Seek. There's something
on
the network. Something.
All right, so
But
clearly
that is too
she's
funny.
a 28-year-old mental midget socialist, Marxist, or whatever the hell she is. And in her little district up there in New York, they seem to
it's a heavily
have an affinity
Hispanic-
for that kind of crap.
Well, it's a heavily Hispanic district, so her last name is Cortez. She grew up, she's not Jenny from the Block Gang. She's very, very well educated, and she's got a lot of money, although apparently she didn't attend class too often, I guess, given that little... exactly. But she beat the Irish white guy that's been in Congress for 30 years. Yeah, really, it's pretty much it. That's pretty much what happened. So things are changing, and the left is doubling down. I think we should talk a little bit about some statistics here that the left is saying, because, you know, the children are still being separated from their parents.
Are they being ripped from the bosom of their mothers?
They are. 2.7 million kids have parents in prison in the United States. 400,000 of those kids are in foster care because their parents are in prison. And 765,000 kids are separated from their military parents, not knowing if they'll ever see them again. That's 765,000 kids in America. Where's the Democrat Party for those people?
I'll tell you where they are, Donna.
Crickets.
Let me ask you this. Do you have this stat near you?
What?
How many kids are separated from their parents due to abortion?
I believe that's about 300,000 a year. There have been over 3 million.
How many
maybe 4
black
million.
kids are separated from their black parents due to abortion? Margaret Sanger.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they wanted with Planned Parenthood. By the way, Margaret Sanger still has her bust, I believe, in the Smithsonian because they revere her so much. Whoopi Goldberg still has her job after cursing out our friend Judge Jeanine Pirro, who we're going to have on the show shortly. But Roseanne Barr gets fired for a tweet. Figure that one out. I want to repeat. 765,000 kids are separated from their military parents, not knowing if they'll ever see them again. And where is the Democrat Party? Focusing on 2,000 kids temporarily separated from their parents or guardian who have come here illegally, and the majority of them, dare I say it, weren't coming here with their parents anyhow. They were coming here with coyotes, and many of them, unfortunately, are roped into gangs, and many of the poor little girls are molested.
Donna, you got about 10 seconds. Who's coming up tonight on The Big Show?
Adam ANDRZEJEWSKI, openthebooks.com, talking about government waste. Frank Gaffney from the Center for Security Policy, Secure Freedom Radio, and Judge Jeanine Pirro, my old friend from the Fox News Channel, and we'll be talking about her new book. It's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don NEUEN. And our very special guest this half hour is somebody we had the pleasure of meeting at the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina Tea Party Coalition Convention, someone by the name of Adam ANDRZEJEWSKI. And I have to practice saying his name a million times because I thought Fiducia was bad, Adam. Anyhow, Adam is a businessman, working on government transparency, which to me is an oxymoron. He resides in the belly of the beast, and that is Illinois. And his website is openthebooks.com. There's a mobile app as well, and we'll explain what that's all about. But Adam, you ran for governor of Illinois back in 2010. You're the oldest of 7 children. You co-founded an independent publishing business with your brother back in 97. And you're so young, get all this stuff done, especially to run for office at such a young age back in 2010. Previously, that office was held by Rod Blagojevich, who's still, I believe, languishing in jail, isn't he? And again,
well, for the, temporarily, right. He's reached out to the president for a presidential commutation of sentence.
That would be interesting.
They know each other from The Apprentice.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true. And you are the founder of openthebooks.com. First off, why don't you just explain what that is? Go ahead.
But Open the Books, it's our mission, Donna, to post every dime taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country. It's a Herculean task. We're the only ones in the space. It's a lot of work. Right now, we have filed 57,000 over the course of the last 12 months, 57,000 Freedom of Information Act requests to literally suck out all public spending from every public body at the federal, state, and local level across America.
So you have said that really D.C., though, is the Super Bowl of corruption.
Well, outside of Illinois, yes, D.C.
Where
is
you
the
live.
Super Bowl.
Why do you live there?
Well, I mean, we go back 8 generations on the family farm on my mother's side, all the way back to 1844. So I'm not leaving Illinois. I'm staying and I'm fighting. We never forget about Illinois, but it is a cesspool of alligators. Look, we exported our corruption writ large to Washington, D.C. and across the country, starting in 2009 with the election of Barack Obama. So Washington, D.C., right now, it can hold title. And what we find is not pretty when we do oversight reports of a tranche every quarter of federal spending. For instance, we just found that the average federal bureaucrat gets 43 days of paid time off. That's 10 holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days. And Donna, if you think about it, if you're a federal bureaucrat, what that means is nearly every single week is a 3-day weekend. It's a 4-day work week nearly every single week of the year. And this isn't France.
It's funny you mention that because I just heard a report that the average worker in the United States gets 10 days, so essentially 2 weeks off. And I know every time I got a job, I had to work 5 years to get that extra week.
Absolutely. So this little benefit cost the American taxpayer last year, we estimate, $23 billion. Now, when we exposed this, I got called to Washington, D.C. I had a private meeting at the Executive Office of the President in the Eisenhower Executive Building, and we are being told that in the fiscal year 2019 budget to Congress, the President will put a policy in that budget to scale back these 43 days, the 8.5 weeks of paid time off for federal bureaucrats.
I mean, this is unbelievable. The other question I have is how does Robert Mueller, as an former FBI director and now going through this joke as an investigator against Russian collusion, worth $18 million? How does that work?
Wow. I didn't know that. I mean, look, there's a lot of ways to monetize influence in the swamp, right? And
obviously,
at $18 million, that is quite the monetization of public service track record.
It really is. Talk a little bit about the 2 million federal bureaucrats. Like you say, their benefits, their time off, costs $23 billion annually, but they can't get fired. That's the problem.
Well, they can't. We did an oversight report called Mapping the Swamp, and here's what we found, Donna, that the federal bureaucracy costs $1.1 million a minute and $500 million a day. The average pay in 78 large agencies, the salary now exceeds $100,000 plus. They get bonuses. 1 million bureaucrats last year got a performance bonus. And many people ask me, how, Adam, can 1 million federal civil servants stand in line for a performance bonus?
Hey, Adam, how can 1 million federal servants stand in line for a performance bonus?
Well, we pulled a government accountability audit from 2015, and they found, Congress's auditors found, that 99.6% of all federal bureaucrats are rated by their agency as highly successful. And Donna, that's impossible. The advertised purity of Ivory soap is only 99.7%.
All right. I kid you about living in Illinois, but let's face it, I'm from New Jersey. So, I mean, this is a joke.
Boy.
And we spoke on the phone before this interview, and I mentioned what town I grew up, which is Maplewood, New Jersey, where my parents' house, their annual taxes exceeded what my parents paid for the house by the time they moved out of that house. So, in other words, they paid $18,000 for this house back in the mid-1940s. When they sold the house in 2008, the taxes were over $18,000 a year. And then you go and you look it up and you find that bureaucrats are making over $200,000 at the school superintendent. And the school superintendent lived across the street from me. All we did was run over to his house every day we wanted a day off for snow. And he's making $200,000, and they've already named a school after Barack Obama.
See, and you've just outlined the executable definition of socialism. Mm-hmm. You own title to your house, but your monthly property tax bill is so high you're paying rent to your local units of government. And that's socialism. Look, in Illinois, and it's the same way in New Jersey and some other states across the country, the mortgage payments, your monthly mortgage payment, is now exceeded by your property tax payment. And that quite simply, for everyone listening, we can all agree that's socialism.
I remember as a joke, this was too funny, when I graduated high school, my parents had a 30-year mortgage on an $18,000 home payment. They had a 30-year mortgage. And my father holds this piece of paper up when I came home from high school one day when I just graduated. He goes, "Look, we own the house." And I'm thinking, what was your mortgage payment? It was like $140 a month. I mean, it was a joke.
The American dream. It's the American dream. And it's being torn and ripped and shredded by a government that at all levels is out of control. So that's our goal at OpenTheBooks.com, is to dig and dig and dig and open up to sunshine all of those little swamps, whether they're in Washington, D.C., in the state governments, or in your municipalities across the entire country, to show the American people exactly where your tax dollar is going.
Exactly. Let me reintroduce you here. We're talking with Adam ANDRZEJEWSKI. Again, he's a businessman and a government transparency advocate. Go to his website, and you can also download the app, OpenTheBooks.com. I've downloaded it. Now, I live in a little tiny town now outside Atlanta, Georgia, so I don't think we really count. But when I do look at my old hometown of Maplewood, New Jersey, it just makes me want to puke. So, Adam, The one thing what I wanted to ask you about also is the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Board. It's basically a money laundering pit, isn't it? And didn't Barack Obama put that in place?
He did, and this is the old Chicago philosophy of you don't let a crisis go to waste. So during the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, when the entire financial system nearly collapsed, the solution was to put this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in place to protect us, the little guy. But they arranged it as such that it was virtually unaccountable. And so what we have found over the course of the last, I think it's funded by the Federal Reserve, not through an appropriation of Congress. Just recently there was actually 2 acting directors of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, one appointed by President Trump, Nick Mulvaney, and the other one tried to hold on to her position, from the Obama years. She just got tired of it and left. So Trump, again, #winning has taken over control of this rogue, out-of-control agency. But the interesting thing was, at the start of the year, we filed a request for the payroll of the CFPB, and we did it through the Office of Personnel Management, and they redacted the whole thing. We did refile that request directly with the agency, and we were able to get who makes what. So this is good news.
They used to say close enough for government work. Now I think they should say crime does pay. I mean, for instance, if you've got Toyota paying billions of dollars with the Takata airbag situation, where does that money go? It doesn't really go to consumers, does it? Or at least a pittance does. Or that might be a bad example. But in general, when the government sues, say, Bank of America or Wells Fargo. Where does that money go?
Well, during the Obama years, there was fee shifting to nonprofit organizations that the administration liked. So there was a sue and settle provision at the DOJ where the money was collected from third parties like Bank of America, and then as a part of the settlement agreement, it was actually paid out to nonprofits of the administration's choosing. That has all ended under Jeff Sessions' Department of Justice, and for good reason.
Wow, it's about time Sessions does something. So in other words, this is how Obama was able to do political payback for his cronies.
Well, and look, all of this was by design. He learned the lessons in Illinois very well. These are what we call legalized money laundering schemes. Mm-hmm. Make no mistake, it's money laundering, but it's also entirely legal the way they practice it. And that's the real scandal.
Unbelievable. Talk about the EPA. $92 million in luxury furniture. They finally get the chief out of there, but I feel that's more political. In my opinion, he was targeted because of his anti-climate change policies. They wouldn't have had a problem with all this furniture buying if he was on their side.
So, if you're going to be the reformer, which Pruitt was in spades, you've got to be holier than the Pope on ethics. Mm-hmm. And he just wasn't. He opened himself up for these attacks, which was too bad. So what we found during 2 years of the Bush years and into the Obama years, that the EPA bureaucrats actually spent $92 million on high-end luxury furniture. So it was $800 pencil holders. It was $7,000 executive desks. We had pushed this over to Bill O'Reilly back in the day at Fox News, and he reached out to the spokesman of the EPA. And this shows you what the culture is in the bureaucracies. Here was the response. Hey, look, we negotiated lower cost office space, so the leases cost less than before. But because of that, we went out and bought new furniture. And still, on a net basis, we saved you pesky taxpayer, money.
How dare you try to question where that's coming from? Well, the HHS secretary, was ousted for, $300,000 flying around. Again, you're right, because Trump is trying to put his own people under higher scrutiny, and that's a good thing. To that effect, though, we're seeing some good things possibly over at Veterans Affairs, but not really.
Well, I think, the president performs on his campaign promises. So people can like him or hate him, but he actually takes his promises very seriously, and over the course of the first 18 months has a pretty good track record of following through on them. One of his campaign promises, of course, was to reform over at the VA. So you do see policies and legislation that is now going into effect to make, to hopefully pay dividends to keep our sacred bond with our warriors, because we've promised them, if you fought for us, you deserve basic health care. And that's the basic social bond that the president seeks to uphold. So we do see the president continuing to add to the headcount over at Veterans Affairs. Now, here's what he has to be careful of. We did a study of the VA payroll, and during a 2-year period during the scandal, when up to 1,000 sick veterans died while waiting to see a doctor because there weren't enough doctors. So 2 years during the scandal and the 3 years after the scandal broke in 2014, Congress threw tens of billions of dollars at the VA. And what we show is that they actually added 50,000 new positions to payroll, but less than 5,100 of those new positions were doctors. And Donna, today, still 500,000 veterans who are sick wait longer than 30 days to see a doctor.
See, I think we're seeing that now with Obamacare. I go past my local medical center, and all I see are these big old buildings going up. And I see my doctor now being bought out by that medical center. And she essentially becomes an employee, she or he. And then a few years later, this is what a lot of people are seeing happening. A few years later, you fire that doctor after you've bought their practice that they spent decades building, and you bring in a Pakistani or an Indian for a third of the price. And to me, I used to be able to go to my doctor and say, I want this, this, and this. Now they have to okay it through the administration and the hospitalist and this and that, and they might have an answer for me in 3 days. It's a joke. And this is exactly what Obamacare was designed to do, and we can't get out from under it. And I think we're becoming the Veterans Administration healthcare system.
And anytime you centralize control in these big bureaucracies, what we find when we do forensic audits of their checkbook, they just waste our taxpayer dollars. Hardworking, working class and middle class taxpayers were paying these taxes, and they're wasting it. For instance, over at the VA, while these sick veterans couldn't get in to see a doctor, we found that coded as furniture was $20 million worth of high-end luxury artwork. So it was Christmas trees priced like cars, 21-foot Christmas trees costing $21,000. It was sculptures priced like 5-bedroom homes. At a VA medical facility in Palo Alto, California, they actually treat blind veterans. We found that they purchased $700,000 in 2 fancy sculptures. And they also purchased, all in with landscaping, a cubed rock sculpture for $1.1 million.
Unbelievable.
And veterans deserve to see doctors, and blind veterans can't see fancy sculptures.
No, that's true. My friend moved down to the Atlanta area from New Jersey with her then 95-year-old father, who's a veteran of World War II. In my town of Carrollton, they put up a huge veteran center, big, beautiful building. And you know what they told him when she brought him over there? Well, we're full right now. You got to go travel a half an hour down to another town to where that other Veterans Administration building is. I mean, seriously? It's pathetic. He's 95 years old.
And look, analyzing payroll at the VA, you find a lot of different things. And you hear stories like that, and your blood just broils because this is not how it should be. There's plenty of money in the system. But for instance, starting in 1996, the VA decided they needed a police force for their medical facilities across the country. The largest medical facilities, for instance, in Chicago, and no city is more dangerous than the city of Chicago. For instance, if you're a private hospital in the city, you don't have your own police force. But the VA decided they needed their own police force. So fast forward to today, there's 3,500 officers. On cash compensation alone, they drain nearly $200 million from the system. This could be money used to provide basic health care to veterans. That's 1,000 doctors that could be hired at $200,000 per doctor. But instead, there's 3,500 police officers. We reached out to the VA to get the crime statistics from their police force. Because, Donna, every single police department in the United States keeps these statistics. But not the VA. They said they had no documents responsive to our request. So we want to know, what the heck are they doing? And is there even a real need to spend $200 million a year on a police force?
Is it getting any better under Trump anywhere?
Yes. I think, at the White House payroll, it's a small portion of all federal spending, but it's a leading indicator of the president's commitment to shrink the size, scope, and power of the federal bureaucracy. For example, on June 30th, the White House is mandated to report to Congress. We were the news organization that picked it up right away. And this is at openthebooks.com for everyone listening to your program now. What we found was, whether it's year over year, Trump versus Trump, which he cut his payroll by $500,000, even the payroll when he was just getting started his first year, he was able to further hone it by 3 employees and cut the total amount of spending by $500,000. But compared against the Obama administration at the same point in their presidencies, he's saving $6 million per year, and he's down nearly 100 employees on the head count. He's doing more with less. He's running a White House payroll that's 20% leaner than what Obama was running at the same time.
Well, that's nice to know. We're talking with Adam ANDRZEJEWSKI, openthebooks.com. And Adam, talk a little bit about your mobile app, because what's so cool about openthebooks.com is you can go into it, put your zip code in, and see what all these lawmakers are making.
So we've got about 85,000 downloads of the mobile app. It's free for Apple and Android. And what it does is it finds your location anywhere in the country off the satellite using GPS coordinates, and between a 1 and a 50-mile radius. Right now, in Georgia or across the country, you can see all the federal spending into your zip code or any zip code across the country. You can see your state checkbooks by and large and their spending. And you can see in many, many states, we've got about 15 million public employees' salaries. So federal, state, and local public employees, what they make in your own backyard. So it's highly interesting stuff.
Yeah, it really is cool. What is the biggest waste that you've been able to find? I know you've got Fortune 100 companies receiving $32 billion in federal grants, like especially Boeing, GM, and Lockheed Martin. But that kind of stuff is needed for defense, no?
So we can all make a public policy argument to have our best and brightest and most successful American companies on contracts do work for government rather than growing more of a bureaucracy. So there's a public policy argument on contracting. Now on grants, I think it's a different story. Grants are subsidies, grants are giveaways. And what we identified in our latest oversight report, Where's the Pork? We identified that the Fortune 100 companies in the last 3 fiscal years received $3.2 billion worth of grants, giveaways, subsidies. And look, they don't need the money. For instance, like Boeing annually has revenues of about $100 billion. They didn't need the $750 million they got from the American taxpayer. And so I think the public purpose argument to compel working and middle-class taxpayers to subsidize Boeing, I think it comes up a little short.
I said $32 billion, so I got a point off there, $3.2 billion, but still a lot of money. All right, who's the biggest offense, in your opinion?
Well, I think the low-hanging fruit are the 43 days of paid time off for federal bureaucrats. That needs to be scaled back. And if you scale that back just to 30 days, which is still 6 full weeks of paid time off, you save the American taxpayer about $5 billion a year. And over the course of a 10-year period, that's $50 billion. That's actually a lot of money.
Yeah, a million here or a million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. It's turning into $1 billion. Actually, it's turning to $1 trillion here and $1 trillion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
You're right. And let's talk about the other big line item in the federal budget. We identified $600 billion a year in federal grant making. Again, subsidies. And we've identified that there's literally a grant for everybody across America. For example, Donna, if you're a child in China, and if you want to learn how to cross your busy street, the American taxpayer paid $200,000 on a grant to create a virtual reality platform to teach Chinese kids how to cross their busy street. If you're a senior citizen in Massachusetts, in Boston, at your senior center, the American taxpayer paid $700,000 on a grant to teach seniors Tai Chi. And if you're a prostitute in California, all of us paid $1.5 million on a federal grant to teach sex ed to California prostitutes, and they could probably teach the class.
It's unbelievable. Bring Stormy Daniels in to teach that one. But why are we giving hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to the Chinese? I mean, all you need to do is go to Queens Boulevard in New York and learn how to cross a busy street. Or not.
We just give away money like crazy. For instance, NASA, and this has nothing to do with putting a man or woman on the moon or sending them into space, but they did an animated children's cartoon for elementary school kids called Space Racers. You and I paid $2.5 million to create this thing. It was for a production of 2 seasons of a main character that embarks on intergalactic space adventures. It's waste.
Sounds like Star Wars to me. All right, Adam, we've got about a minute left. Do a pitch about your great website and your mobile app.
So just come to openthebooks.com. We're the only ones in the space with the mission, every dime online in real time. And it's our objective to take everything taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country and display it so all of us, regular people across the country, can see where our tax dollars are going and give it oversight. Here's the goal, Donna. We need to hold the political class accountable, both Democrats and Republicans, for their tax and spend decisions.
And they should not be multimillionaires. I mean, Maxine Waters has like an $8 million home, from what I hear. And there's no way these people should be retiring multimillionaires when they're making maybe $150,000 to $200,000 a year. There's a lot of hanky-panky going on. Well, Adam ANDRZEJEWSKI, unfortunately, the time is already up. Again, folks, it's openthebooks.com. Search by zip code, get the mobile app, and it's awesome because you can find out all the government waste going on in your community. But Adam really knows from whence he speaks. He's a businessman And his main thing is government transparency, and he's an advocate for that. Again, he resides in the belly of the beast in Illinois, and he was so young back in 2010 to run for governor of Illinois. You just got to love it. Adam, thank you so much. Openthebooks.com. Again, folks, search by zip code. I can't stress it enough. Adam ANDRZEJEWSKI, thank you so much for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Thanks for your interest in our work, Don. I look forward to coming back.
Absolutely. And coming up next, the great Frank Gaffney of Secure Freedom Radio and Judge JEANINE PIRRO. It's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don NEUEN, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don NEUEN. And our next guest is somebody we've had the pleasure of meeting at CPAC. We have his show on our network, that would be Secure Freedom Radio, but we've actually never had him on the show. This show, anyhow, Cowboy Logic Radio, and that is one Frank Gaffney. Frank is a national security expert and founder, president, and CEO of the Center for Security Policy. You can find all that at centerforsecuritypolicy.org. He's the host of Secure Freedom Radio, as I said, heard on our network. And Frank Gaffney, you are, in my opinion, the go-to guy when it comes to the Sharia law going on in this country, how they're trying to take over this country, and the Muslim Brotherhood and trying to outlaw it. Frank Gaffney, thank you for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio.
It is a distinct pleasure. Thank you for picking up our show and disseminating what I think is just common sense. Really, I'm happy with that introduction. Needless to say, but I have to, in truth, indicate that I've learned an awful lot from people who are smarter about all this than I am, and that's one of the privileges, as you know, of doing these radio programs in particular. Is it teaches you a lot as well as hopefully your audience about what's going on.
Well, you have a lot of great people on your show. We've had the pleasure also on our show of having Claire Lopez, and she really is the one who hits home the fact that Sharia law is not compliant with the U.S. Constitution.
Well, I think if she were on this program, she would say that's only half of it. It's actually antithetical to the U.S. Constitution, not just not consistent with it. If you believe, and let's just say this up front, not all Muslims do believe, but if you believe that it is the word of Allah, that you must practice Sharia, you must not only make other Muslims submit to it, but everybody else. And in this totalitarian and brutally repressive program, they call Sharia law, or it's really more than just law. But if you follow it, if you adhere to it, you cannot allow others to practice freedom of speech, to practice freedom of religion, to in any way, shape, or form deviate from the Sharia program, to make laws democratically, to believe that there can be any law other than Sharia, for that matter, that you know, you must kill homosexuals, you must brutally repress, if not actually kill Jews, and for that matter, Christians and others who were, you know, at odds with your program. I mean, none of these things, not a single one of them, is compatible with the Constitution. That's true, but consistent with the whole concept that we have unalienable rights given to us by our Creator that are, you know, all about those kinds of the basic freedoms and the right to practice your life in a manner consistent with them. This is the problem of our time, and too few of us understand it. So I'm grateful to you for having a chance to talk a little bit about it.
On June 28th, you filed a brief calling on the Trump administration to outlaw the Muslim Brotherhood. When I read that, I was like, yes. Why has this taken so long? But I mean, this could be the one thing that could really change the dynamics in this country if that were to happen.
Yeah, I think that the thrust of the brief was actually a little bit different. It called on the U.S. government and the courts to recognize that just as in the past, the United States, specifically the President of the United States, but the United States government, has excluded people who seek to come to this country from doing so on the basis of their adherence to a totalitarian ideology that is antithetical, again, to our Constitution and government and way of life, namely, in the past, Nazism and communism. And what we basically argued in this brief, which two of our colleagues, David Yerushalmi and Robert Muse of the American Freedom Law Center, put together, 6 or so of us sort of national security practitioners endorsed it, but it was written by them. It basically argued that just as in the past we kept out those other totalitarian ideologies, adherents, we should do the same with respect to those who adhere to Sharia, that they, like those others, Nazis, communists, and so on, have a similarly incompatible agenda to those that we follow in this country. And the Muslim Brotherhood just happens to be the leading edge of Sharia supremacism in the United States, and indeed, I would argue, worldwide. It has spawned all of the terrorist groups virtually around the world. It is articulating and advancing inexorably this whole idea that everyone must submit to Sharia. It does it in a particularly insidious way, which is what argues for designating it as a terrorist group, because they use terror where they can, and they use seditious, stealthy subversion where violence is impracticable. And they must be designated as a terrorist group so that we can stop them without regard for which of these techniques they're using to subvert our country and take us down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with the great Frank Gaffney, a gentleman that we have followed his great work for years. We admire him. We respect the work that he does, and we respect the fact that he practices a great characteristic of Ronald Reagan, and that is that he believes in surrounding himself with great people, just like Claire Lopez and many others. Mr. Gaffney, you were mentioning the courts just a minute ago in Sharia law. How is it, in your opinion, and I know the answer to this question, but how is it, in your opinion, that a judge in New York can be a Muslim and adhere first to constitutional law, whether it be state or any type of federal constitutional law, when the very basis of her religion is contradicting that, in that she must follow Sharia law above all others?
Let me clarify. I think it is up to Muslims to determine whether they wish to be bound by the dictates of Sharia. There's no getting around it, that it is part and parcel of their faith. But having said that, I think there's unquestionably Muslims, in fact, I suspect many in this country, who don't want to live under Sharia. In some cases, they came here to get away from it. And they certainly don't want to impose it on other people. The problem arises when you're dealing with somebody who is an actual Sharia adherent Muslim. And those folks, I think, cannot actually follow our Constitution or any other form of law that is at odds with Sharia. I mean, it's just fundamentally at odds, as I said earlier, with their whole program. So whether that's a judge in New York, or whether it's a governor, a gubernatorial candidate in Michigan, or whether it is a guy who wants to be the attorney general of the state of Minnesota, or whether it is people seeking to serve in Congress, or some, at least two at the moment, who are serving in Congress, when they swear, as they must, an oath to uphold and defend, or version of that, the Constitution of the United States, they are either going to be unable to do so, or they're lying about it. In either way, that would seem to me to be a disqualifier.
So they're either apostates or they are practicing, what's the term, takia?
Takia.
One of the two?
Well,
is that, I mean, putting it
again,
in most simplistic terms, is that the only two things that it really could be?
You know, my view of it is, as a non-Muslim, that it should be up to Muslims as to whether there's room within Islam to practice a Sharia-free Islam. I can tell you that the authorities of the faith don't think there is. They say so. The Muslim Brotherhood doesn't think that's the case. And for them, people who argue that they can, in fact, be both Muslim and non-Sharia adherent, they do call them apostates. They do call them people who have left the faith, and that is a capital offense. But again, I don't presume to say that that's the case. I'm just reporting what is the general practice. But the other alternative is definitely operating in the instance in which people who and I'd say Keith Ellison comes to mind, Andre Carson comes to mind. This fellow by the name of Al-Said, who is a candidate for governor of Michigan, comes to mind. These people are Sharia adherent. And I think it behooves us to know what they believe they are doing when they simultaneously practice that supremacist totalitarian program on the one hand, and then profess that they are going to faithfully uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States on the other. I think takia is a term I assume your audience is familiar with. They are, in fact, lying for the faith when they do that. But the voters, the public, certainly have a need to know whether they truly mean it, whether they are reliably practicing it, or whether they're lying to us for the faith.
Yeah, takia means it's okay to lie to us infidels. And no matter what you think about, I'm going to start right out by saying Barack Obama and John Brennan, the former CIA director, I look at the actions. You know, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. ISIS is the JV team. I mean, there have been so many lies, and the actions of giving Iran $145 million in the dead of night. I mean, this is a billion. I'm sorry. Yeah. You know, a million here and a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Real
Thank
money.
you, Edward Dirksen. But yeah, I mean, to me, that's what I look at. And what really raised my spidey sense as a reporter was minute one of Barack Obama's presidency. All of a sudden, when he was sworn in, something went wrong and they went behind closed doors and they did it again. I'm like, I don't know. I really, really don't care what his religion is. What I do care is how his actions are. And to me, growing up in Indonesia, which the biggest per capita Muslim population in the world, had to have an influence on him, and I think it showed in his presidency. Talk a little bit about John Brennan, if you could, though. He is the former CIA director. He's accusing Trump of treason. The guy is an admitted, he's not an admitted communist, but he voted for a communist back in the 70s. How did he become CIA director? More importantly, pass a security check with that kind of background? He speaks fluent Arabic. He spent a lot of time in the Middle East.
There's a lot to unpack there. John Brennan is, as you say, a man who served under Barack Obama as his director of the Central Intelligence Agency. He spent most of his professional life in the CIA, including doing a stint as what they call station chief, the top agency individual in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He left that and left government service, as I recall, became politically active, worked for Barack Obama's candidacy in 2000, and 2008. He was rewarded for his work on the campaign by becoming the first Homeland Security advisor to President Obama. He served in that role for about 4 years, as I recall, and then I think when the president was reelected, he moved him over to the agency. He has become sort of notorious of late for some of his virulent attacks against Donald Trump through Twitter. I think he's a MSNBC correspondent, contributor, if I'm not mistaken. But whether it's on television or whether it's in tweeting, or he has been widely, I think, regarded as somewhat unhinged in the vitriol he's heaping on the president, including, as you say, most recently suggesting that what the president did with Vladimir Putin at Helsinki recently was, quote, treasonous, unquote. But as you say, there's a lot of stuff that's troubling about John Brennan's background. He's acknowledged having voted for Gus Hall, the perennial Communist Party candidate for president of the United States in his earlier years. He was, as Homeland Security Advisor to the president, very friendly with Muslim Brotherhood front groups and operatives, to the point where he did something that I find to be completely unconscionable, and that is when a number of those groups and some of their leftist allies and enablers, what we call the red-green axis, wrote John Brennan as Homeland Security Advisor, I believe it was in October of 2011, demanding that not only the FBI, which had already agreed to do this, but also the military and the intelligence community and the Homeland Security Department all banish from their training materials and the people that they use for training those who would give offense to Muslims. John Brennan, in November of 2011, as I recall, agreed to that agenda, and what was known subsequently as the Great Purge was mounted to ensure that basically, let's be clear, the people who are in our first lines of defense against, among other things, enemies foreign and domestic, are witless about the problem with Sharia supremacism and the jihad that it commands of its followers. So that's sort of John Brennan in a microcosm. He subsequently, as CIA director, also, I believe, was deeply involved in what seems increasingly to be a conspiracy on the part of the so-called deep state against first the Trump candidacy and then the Trump presidency, including something that's almost completely unremarked these days, and that is that what is described uniformly as the consensus view of the intelligence community that the Russians interfered in our elections was actually the result of a very, very carefully manipulated intelligence analysis performed by several hand-picked individuals at only, I believe, 3 of the some 17 intelligence agencies that make up the U.S. intelligence community. So, in other words, John Brennan, I believe, cooked the books to find what he wanted to find and to support the allegation that not only was there this Russian interference, but that there was in some way, shape, or form collusion, as they call it, between the president, now president, candidate Trump or his campaign and the Russians.
Well, let's hope that in the coming months, John Brennan can possibly be exposed for exactly who he is. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to the great Frank Gaffney. Mr. Gaffney, has the Trump administration tapped in to the great resource of your organization and of your work? Have they tapped into people like you and Claire Lopez and Trevor Loudon? I know that you're good friends with Trevor and John Guandolo. Has that administration tapped into you guys? And if so, if for what you're able to discuss with us, what are you advising them on? And if not, what can we do to help that happen?
Well, thank you for that question. Of course, there have been several distinct elements of the Trump administration. There was the brief period when very good friends of ours like Mike Flynn and Steve Bannon were prominent, very short-lived in the case of Mike Flynn, and I think there was an opportunity for us to help in a lot of different ways. Not so much when Mike Flynn was replaced by H.R. McMaster, a man who I believe was determined to subvert President Trump rather than help him advance his agenda, and we said so. And he was not much interested in our views, so we wound up doing what we've done for most of the past 30 years as an organization, which is simply provide our research and analyses and commentaries and so on to the public, and hope that to varying degrees that will migrate into the hands of policymakers, at least those who are more susceptible to the kind of common sense, peace through strength focused approach that we promote. Then, as you know, earlier this year, the H.R. McMaster era ended, thank God, as did that of Rex Tillerson at the State Department, and two long-time friends and allies of ours, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, respectively, became the National Security Advisor to the President and the Secretary of State. And we have been working with them on a number of things, and I'm very pleased to say John Bolton further enhanced the opportunity for us to help by taking as his chief of staff and executive secretary of the National Security Council, one of our top vice presidents, Fred Fleitz. And Fred is now working for John directly, and I think, again, the opportunities for collaboration and cross-pollination and otherwise helping the president have grown dramatically as a result.
Yeah, I was really excited to see that Fred Fleitz moved into the administration. That's awesome. You spoke about peace through strength, Frank Gaffney. You worked in the Reagan administration. I can honestly say that so far, Donald Trump is even stronger in some respects, given the huge onslaught against him and how he's still able to make great strides where we need it, in my opinion, and I'm sure your opinion as well, and for the betterment of this country and the security of our country.
He has done amazing things in the areas in which he has the greatest latitude to do that. There are some things in which he needs help from the Congress, and by and large, those have been less aggressively achieved than one would like. I, as you mentioned, I had the privilege of serving under President Reagan, and I remember vividly, actually before I began in the administration, I worked on Capitol Hill in the Senate Armed Services Committee, and from practically day one of that presidency, Mr. Reagan was pursuing peace through strength with help from the Congress in a way that, frankly, we're still living off of today. Many of the military capabilities that we rely upon, particularly in terms of our nuclear arsenal, but also many of our, ships and even aircraft and other weapon systems were bought and introduced initially during the Reagan era, which really tells us something. They're 30 years old or so, yeah. And that is an imperative for us to modernize them, something President Trump wants to do, but hasn't been able to get as much accomplished, at least in that space, as I would like and as I think we need. But otherwise, in terms of his policies, by and large, some of the initiatives like the idea of a space force, which I think channeled kind of the inner Ronald Reagan, his general understanding of the importance of relationships with Israel, his effort to enhance our alliances by getting people both to pull their load, like our NATO allies, and stop, weakening themselves by making themselves dependent upon the Russians, for heaven's sakes, whom we're helping defend themselves against. But they're nonetheless importing vast amounts of natural gas and energy from. I mean, these are things that I think are just common sense again.
Yeah,
they're rooted in an appreciation of peace through strength, and they're what we need.
Yeah, he actually, I think, did Germany a huge service by kind of waking them up to that. Hey, you get 70% of your stuff from your natural gas and your oil from Russia. You better stop doing that. They can just turn off the spigot. Unfortunately, Frank Gaffney, we've run out of time. But everybody can find your great work at the Center for Security Policy.org. Again, he's national security expert, founder, president, and CEO of the Center for Security Policy, and host of Secure Freedom Radio, heard on our network. Frank Gaffney, thank you so much for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio, and please keep up the great work.
We will do so. And if I could just say a shorter, easier way to remember our website is securefreedom.org, which is what we're trying to do.
securefreedom.org. Okay, Frank Gaffney, thank you so much. And coming up next, Judge Jeanine Pirro, author and my former colleague at the Fox News Channel. It's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia along with Don NEUEN, and I am so excited to reconnect with a good buddy of mine from the Fox News Channel, and that would be one Judge Jeanine Pirro. And I really don't think her introduction is needed, but I'm going to go through this long litany, Judge Jeanine, because it takes up the entire show, but it's worthwhile. I mean, I had a 30-year career in, media in New York, but you actually had a career that made a difference. Obviously, your new book is Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, the case against the anti-Trump conspiracy. But Judge Jeanine Pirro, your career just goes back so much farther. It's just, let me get started. You are a nationally recognized legal expert appearing on television programs such as The Today Show, NBC, Good Morning America, and also, obviously, 60 Minutes, 48 Hours, Nightline, Larry King Live. You've won an Emmy. We won't mention The View. That was in that group as well. Author of many books. But the one book that a lot of people don't know about, I think needs to be highlighted, is To Punish and Protect, One DA's Fight Against a System That Coddles Criminals. And that's sort of what you tried to get to at The View, Judge Jeanine. But let me just tell everybody again, your show is on Saturdays at the Fox News Channel. You can find her at judgejeaninepirro.com, Facebook, and foxnews.com. But again, the book we want to talk about is Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, the case against the anti-Trump conspiracy. And Judge Jeanine, just welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio. That's all I can say. It's so nice to talk to you again.
Well, and I want your listeners to know that how excited I was when I saw your name on my list of calls this morning, Donna. I mean, we do go back a long way. It's like so many people in life. You just kind of go to the next chapter and you kind of miss people, but I'm thrilled to reconnect. And you mentioned my first book, To Punish and Protect, which was when I was a sitting elected DA in Westchester County, New York. It was all about right and wrong and good and evil and fighting the good fight, in the trenches where the fight between good and evil happens every day. Little did I know, fast forward about, 25 years later, I'd be writing Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, a case against the anti-Trump conspiracy, which is essentially on the same theme, Donna. It's about right and wrong and good and evil in the in our system of government. And we've got a Department of Justice and an FBI that implicated itself in the election of Donald Trump in 2016, when America felt instinctively that we need an outsider president, when instinctively Americans knew that something was awry. Somebody goes into Congress of mediocre means, they come out multimillionaires. And then when Donald Trump gets elected, the veil comes down and we see that the Justice Department, FBI, tried to drag a corrupt presidential candidate, a Democrat, Hillary Clinton, across the presidential finish line, and then tried to stage and set up a counterintelligence investigation with alleged Russia collusion in the event that Donald Trump was elected, and he was. And every day we see the results of an investigation that is focused on bringing down a duly elected president. And it is a simple read, Donna. It's footnoted all over the place. But it's a real simple read about how government today is working, how different it is from when we started. And I talk about the man, Donald Trump. And, I've known him almost 30 years. And what a force of nature this guy is. And how he is accomplishing things for America that people said would never or could never be accomplished.
Well, here's what gets me, is he's done so much. I mean, I covered the opening of the Woolman rink that sat there for decades, and it cost him nothing
I talk about that in the book.
Do you really? I went ice skating for, I think I was working at NBC at the time. Shouldn't admit that, but I was. And I went skating around, because I used to be a pretty good ice skater, actually. But we talked about all the great things that Donald Trump did. And he got accolades from groups of all races. I mean, the NAACP loved him. And then all of a sudden, because he puts an R behind his name, he's a racist. And it's just, it's crazy. You know, Vladimir, another Vladimir that the left loves so much, Vladimir Lenin, actually said, accuse others of what you yourself are doing. And I think this is a classic example of that.
You hit the nail on the head for several reasons. Number one, I write a chapter called The Boomerang. And it's whenever you point a finger at someone, three fingers are pointing back at you. And that's what they did with the Russia collusion. They alleged that Donald Trump is in collusion with Russia, when in truth it was the Obama administration that hit the reset button, that sold uranium to Russia, that allowed Russia to annex Crimea and do nothing, that allowed for the invasion of Ukraine and did nothing, that drew a red line in the sand and did nothing. Well, Donald Trump is the one who just killed hundreds in Syria of Russians and who is arming the Ukrainians against Russia, who has sanctioned Russia. And, it goes on and on about this boomerang. But every day, Donald Trump gets up, and he faces incoming, Donna, like I've never seen in the history of this country. And anyone at the tip of the spear who is trying to drain a swamp is going to get pushed back. But he's a force of nature, and this is a guy who can go into a den of lions and come out with a suit and tie straight. He is a force who isn't owned by anyone, who doesn't need the job. He could be in Scotland playing golf, but every day they accuse him of things they themselves are guilty of. And you said it so well, and I talk about all of this in the book.
Liars, leakers, and liberals. We're talking with Judge Jeanine Pirro, who won an Emmy for a syndicated show, the Judge Jeanine Show. She's the first woman elected a DA of Westchester County, New York. For you folks that don't know, it's just above New York City. Received national attention for founding one of the nation's first domestic violence units, crusaded on behalf of victims of violent crime. And when you talked about that on The View last week, Judge Jeanine, Whoopi Goldberg didn't want to hear anything about that. So who actually is the one that allows the other side to speak? I don't think it's the liars, the leakers, and the liberals.
Well, it's amazing. They call Donald Trump a fascist. A fascist is someone who allows only one way of thinking and shuts down anyone who speaks differently. But we have to remember, this is the United States of America. There's a First Amendment free speech. They don't want to tolerate it. And one of the things that, I decided when I made the decision to go on The View was that, look, I've been on The View many times, and not recently, though, and, I like the people there. Everything I say in my book, Liars and Leakers, I back up with facts and footnotes and all that, and, so I went on. If you want to watch it, I'm sure it's on YouTube or whatever, but there are two segments, and the first segment, it's tough, but it goes well, and the second segment, the wheels come off the wagon, and Whoopi ends it prematurely, storms away, and Meghan McCain is mouthing, I'm so sorry, and I'm sitting there, and I end up, taking my microphone off myself. No one is there to take it off from me. And then when I get to the back, Whoopi is, I say to her, I say, look, I've done more for victims my whole career, and that was it. It was F you, get the F out. And I was with 4 or 5 people, and they were stunned. We were thrown out. So it is a microcosm of what's happening in the country every day, where the left not only doesn't want to hear what you have to say, but they want to make sure no one hears what you have to say, whether it's on university campuses or anywhere else. So we've got to stop it. And as I said on The View, I said we need to talk to each other. We need to be able to talk this out. Why are people so crazed? Why is it that when Donald Trump, who's owned by no one, makes a decision to run for president, and as you so aptly say, Donna, puts an R behind his name, all of a sudden he's public enemy number one? Right up to that moment, Every newspaper wanted him. Television, movies, Hollywood. Everybody loved Donald Trump. And he runs as a Republican, and that's the end of that. And, I'm speaking to him, he said to me, and I've known him 30 years, and my then husband was his lawyer. We used to fly down to Palm Beach with him and all that jazz, and when the kids were little. And he said, Janine, I signed up for this. My kids didn't. But no one is off limits when it comes to Donald Trump. If anyone dared say anything about Sasha or Malia or Chelsea Clinton, forget it. Donald Trump's 10-year-old is not immune from the criticism. And I think the most important thing that people can take away from this, Donna, is, look, we instinctively understood we needed the outsider to clean the swamp. We instinctively knew there was corruption in Washington. We didn't know how bad it was until, you come face to face with a Peter Strzok who says, we're not going to let him get elected president, and we'll get an insurance policy, which was the Russia collusion investigation. And then when we put it before Congress, he says, don't believe your lying eyes. I mean, it's just crazy. But we knew what had to be done, and the American people did, and they elected Donald Trump. 2018 election is even more important because the left is determined to end it all if they don't impeach him.
Yeah, that's really the big problem, because this is not an investigation by Robert Mueller for Russian collusion. This is an impeachment investigation. And I don't understand. Don does a great Jeff Sessions imitation. We won't do it for you now. But he basically says, anybody seen Jeff Sessions? Put a bolo out for Jeff Sessions.
Judge, it's Jeff Sessions here. I'd like to tell you hello and welcome you to Cowboy Logic Radio. I come from the state right next to the lovely state of Georgia. I'm due west, if you would say. And I just want to welcome you to Cowboy Logic Radio. Back to you, Donna.
Well, we put out a bolo for Judge Jeff Sessions every show.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Donna.
No, you finish your thought.
Yeah, but I mean, I keep saying, the guy's been hiding in the closet somewhere. Where is he?
They got something on him. They definitely do. But here's the thing. My never-Trumper friends and the few liberal friends I have left said, well, Mueller's supposed to only look for collusion with Donald Trump. Well, okay. So he has a broad range he can work with, from Rod Rosenstein or whatever he is. And that in and of itself, and I'm not a lawyer, is illegal from what I gather. But then if there's no limitations, we should be looking at Uranium One. We should be looking at Bill Clinton getting $500,000 for a speech, at the Clinton Foundation getting $145 million and giving 20% of our uranium away when you're Secretary of State. I mean, can you imagine?
But you see, they're not going to do that, and they have no intention of doing that because they are so invested in making sure that no one looks at that transfer of uranium to 20% of it to Russian interests, because they were all involved. Bob Mueller was the head of the FBI. And is the guy who prosecuted the Russians who were here and bribing people to get to our uranium. And I guess they found fertile ground in Hillary Clinton and hubby Bill. All of them, this is about them even more. They've got to protect themselves, and they know it. And the only way to do that is to keep Jeff Sessions in a closet, for Rod Rosenstein, who actually handled the Russia case, and then, plea bargained it outside of the guidelines, and took the plea on Labor Day, sentenced outside of the guidelines right before Christmas, on Christmas Eve. I mean, they all have something. And Jim Comey, oh my goodness. I worked with him when I was a DA. He was a U.S. attorney in the Southern District. This guy lies before Congress, and he's best friends with Mueller, and Mueller is supposed to decide the credibility of the witnesses. Rosenstein writes the memo that says Comey should be fired. Trump fires him. Now Rosenstein is running the investigation as to whether or not Trump should have fired Comey.
I know.
I mean, this is all lunacy.
Let's look at the biggest liars, leakers, and liberal in my case, and that is former CIA Director John Brennan.
Yep.
Tried to spy on congressmen and senators, and all of a sudden yesterday or the day before said, oh, I'm sorry about that. Admitted voting for a communist back in the 70s, Gus Hall. Speaks fluent Arabic. To me, his tendencies and actions speak volumes. He's anti-American. And you can't have treason. John Brennan should know this unless you're actually at war with the country. So I would put out there that that's treasonous because of what happened with the Iran nuke deal.
Well, John Brennan, I talk about him in Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, and I call him, in terms of the swamp, I call him on scum. John Brennan, you're right, voted for a communist, and he has the unmitigated goal to say that Donald Trump should be charged with treason, which he knows is absurd. But, it's about ginning up the left. It's about trying to get everybody, to say it's time to get rid of him. John Brennan says it's treason, and Jim Clapper's the one who said, he was asked directly, do you spy on Americans? No. Do you spy on Americans? Well, not wittingly. I mean, give me a break. They lie to Congress all the time. And, a poor kid who's a sailor takes a picture on the submarine he's living on. He sends it to his mother, and they put him in jail for exposing classified documents. Hillary Clinton running around not only exposing all of our secrets on her personal server, but she did it so that she could get cash coming into the Clinton Foundation while she is the Secretary of State. And if there isn't a payback of $145 million for that uranium, I mean, I don't know, why anyone would give that charity any money. And you know who gave the Clinton Global Initiative their 501c3 status?
Who did?
Take a guess. Lois Lerner.
Never would have guessed on that one. They certainly do look the other way as well. And you know what? The thing is, Judge Jeanine, as a woman, you really are just a trailblazer. Winning an Emmy, first women elected DA in Westchester County, national attention for founding one of the nation's first domestic violence units. Then you sit there with Hillary Clinton saying, well, women first and I'm for women. Yeah, she's for women who want to stay on the public dole, that are victims, but God forbid you get off the government plantation, quite frankly, to, use a phrase that Herman Cain uses, then you're fair game. Look at the attacks on you. Look at the attack on Sarah Sanders and basically all the strong women in the Trump administration now. There's been no other administration's had as many women in it at all.
Well, no other administration has had women in such strong positions of power, Donna, and I talk about it in Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, but no administration has suffered the insults to women that the Trump administration has. And when a Maxine Waters can get out there, and I hosted Hannity last night, and we talked about people outside of Maxine Waters' office burning the flag, yelling, F America, F America. I mean, that really is offensive. She doesn't bother to come out and say, what, this isn't right. Their job is to obstruct. It is to resist. It's what they do. And our job is to make sure, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to make sure people understand what the facts are, where the criminality is, and, who this man is, Donald Trump, who has made a decision to drain the swamp, Donna. And anyone at the tip of the spear is not going to have an easy job. They're going to get pushed back. They're going to get incoming like he does every day. It is it's not an easy job, and we ought to be grateful that he's doing it. The economy's never been better. ISIS caliphate is destroyed. People have got tax cuts. African Americans, the best employment numbers in the history of this country. And, when I mentioned it on The View the other day, two people to my right, one of them was like, yeah, thank Obama for that. I didn't even respond to that because I was too busy, with the left flank. But our job right now is to get out the truth. Americans need to understand a lot is at stake, and that's why I wrote the book. And I'll be talking about it on my show tonight, and I am on my way into the city, which I'm sure you remember well.
It's a long day for you, I'm sure, on Saturdays. That's for sure.
Hey, Judge,
yes,
Don NEUEN here, and when I get when I'm in the middle of an interview between someone like Judge Jeanine Pirro and Donna Fiducia,
two New Yorkers,
New Jersey ladies, I say very little. I know exactly where I need to reside, and that's exactly what I do. But I needed to ask you, I want to tap into your expertise on an issue that has been troubling me for the past month or so, and that is the situation with the Pakistani IT guys, the DNC. I'm sorry, not Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's actually Dee Snider from Twisted Sister that was involved in that. And I want to get your take as a former prosecutor. How did that actually go bad? I mean, clearly we kind of know how it went bad, but I really found that to be a massive, massive injustice.
Well, I'm not sure that it's even over yet. But what I do know is that Debbie Wasserman Schultz knew the danger zone when that computer was found with all the information on it and the movement of money from the United States to the Pakistani bank, as well as all of those individuals who were family members of Imran Awan, the Pakistani, and IT people making hundreds of thousands of dollars working in Congress who have no IT background. And the berating that Debbie Wasserman Schultz did of that Capitol Hill police officer for having that computer, which was given to him, a laptop that apparently was lost or, is an insult to all of us. I don't know how it's going to end, but what I do know is this. That Debbie Wasserman Schultz was in charge of the DNC when the emails were hacked. She refused to give that server to the FBI. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the one who manipulated the DNC along with Hillary Clinton to make sure that Bernie Sanders wasn't the candidate. The more we talk about this, and I don't have the answers, Don. I don't have the answer to everything. But I have inquired myself as to what the status of that case is. They say they took a plea bargain with one, but there's so much more to it. But given that the Department of Justice is being run by Rod Rosenstein, who is protecting Jim Comey and is protecting Peter Strzok and the rest of them, I don't know that we'll ever know. And if that's the case, then for sure we need to make sure that we keep them out of the White House for the next the next term as well.
I agree. I could not agree more. The most critical thing that I think we all face right now is the midterm elections. If we can hang on to that House of Representatives, I think we're in good shape. I really do.
I agree.
Quick question also, if you can look into that crystal ball you got. If we hang on to that House of Representatives in November, do you think that we are going to see Donald Trump pulling the trigger that we've all been waiting, the many triggers that we've all been waiting on? Do you think that there's going to be some heads rolling? Do you think that there's going to be some massive change taking place that he's sitting back waiting for just to make sure we can get through this election?
Well, I haven't spoken to him about that in particular, but I really believe that, the Donald Trump that's sitting there today in 2018 is a lot more knowledgeable than the businessman who came in 2016. I think he gets it, and he now knows who the enemy is, even in the rhinos. And I talk about this in Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. There are rhinos who should just as well have a D in front of or after their name, and they're the deep state. I really believe that if he gets this message of support, I really think there will be things that will be different in 2019.
On social media, I think the only thing I use constantly is hashtag double standard. But it's so much deeper than I even thought it would be, and I'm sure Donald Trump thought it would be. Case in point, Christopher Wray on some, panel he was on, getting up there saying, well, he thinks that Robert Mueller, and his investigation should continue. Seriously? I really feel, Judge Jeanine, I'm sorry. I think the whole FBI, I think everything ought to be just taken down. And I'm sorry. I know there are some really good agents in there, but unfortunately, this is a lot deeper than I ever thought it was going to be. And these are newly, elected people, or I should say confirmed people in the Trump administration. And it's just totally a double standard.
Well, the first time Christopher Wray testified as head of the FBI, I just thought to myself, this guy is, he's not who Donald needs. The FBI has been very reluctant in handing over information to Congress, who oversees them by constitutional authority and is an equal branch of government to the executive branch and the legislative branch. I think that Christopher Wray has done something. He's kind of taken sides in this, and what is amazing to me, they're redacting things that don't need to be redacted. Christopher Wray did not need the Inspector General's report to figure out that there's a problem in the FBI. Why did Andrew McCabe stay there so long? Christopher Wray, Christopher Wray is supposed to be the head of the FBI. I don't need some outsider to tell me there's a problem in my agency. I'm a cop, or supposed to be the top cop in the country. used to be able to figure it out. But Christopher Wray is working day in and day out with Rod Rosenstein, whose job it is, who continues to support the Mueller investigation, to give it authority, jurisdiction, and even expand the authority of the Robert Mueller investigation. We never thought that politics was this bad, but it is very bad.
The Fox is watching the hen house. Andy McCarthy had said that there were 3 prosecutors when he prosecuted the 9/11 conspirators that killed almost 3,000 people. And we have 17 and adding more right now to look after something that never happened, which to me is just totally egregious. But Judge Jeanine Pirro, unfortunately, it's gone by so fast. I want to plug your book here, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. So exciting. I'm so happy for your new book. It highlights the most egregious lies that you've seen, and I'm sure there's been an awful lot of them. Host of the Fox News Channel show on Saturday night, Justice with Judge Jeanine. You can find the book on Amazon.com. And if you got any closing comments, Judge, please lay them on us right now. I'm just so happy to talk to you again.
Well, and Donna, to you and to Don, and I agree with Don when he said 2018 is so important, the midterm elections. On my show tonight on Fox at 9 o'clock, I'm going to talk about all the latest news. I mean, John Podesta just got immunity from Robert Mueller. There's some crazy stuff going on there. We'll talk about that tonight, along with what happened on The View. So, Don, it's great to talk to you. Big hug, and to Don and to all your listeners, all my love, and I'll see you tonight.
Absolutely. We like to close the show with a quote, and I had that other quote from Vladimir Lenin. I think Winston Churchill said this, though. The fascists of the right will soon become the fascists of the left. And I think we're really seeing that here in this country. Find her at JudgeJeaninePirro.com and Facebook and FoxNews.com, and find her book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy, on Amazon.com as well. Judge Jeanine Pirro, thank you so much for joining us again here on Cowboy Logic Radio. And that wraps up our show, folks. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, God bless America.
Come on, take in my dark sunglasses. Come on, take in my dark sunglasses.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.